America has long been a land of automotive dreams. Big engines, flashy chrome, and the promise of freedom on four wheels. But through every Mustang, Corvette, or Cadillac, there's a horror story lurking in the shadows. A car so badly conceived, so poorly executed, it makes it wonder how it even left the factory. These cars weren't merely failures, they were embarrassments, dangers, and sometimes death traps. Here are 10 of the worst American cars ever produced. Vehicles so ridiculous, underpowered, or unsafe that they belong in a museum of automotive shame.
Dear viewer, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for your support.
Number 10. In 1958, Ford Motor Company made one of the most ambitious and disastrous product launches in automotive history, the Edsel. Billed as the car of the future, it was meant to fill the gap between Ford and Mercury in Ford's lineup, but instead of becoming a sales hit, it turned into a marketing, design, and engineering catastrophe that nearly sank the company's reputation. The 1958 Edsel Ranger, the base model of the lineup, embodied everything wrong with the project, from its grotesque styling to its mechanical failures and tone-deaf marketing. By the mid-1950s, Ford executives believed they needed a new brand to compete in the mid-priced market between Chevrolet and Cadillac. The Edsel was intended to be modern, futuristic, and technologically advanced, a car that would symbolize post-war optimism and prosperity. Ford spent over $250 million, nearly $2.5 billion today, developing and promoting the Edsel. It was supposed to be the most researched, most customer-focused automobile ever designed. Unfortunately, nearly every assumption proved wrong. Let's address the elephant in the room, the grille. The Edsel's front end was dominated by a vertical horse-collar grille intended to evoke European elegance. Instead, the public saw something else. Many said it resembled a toilet seat, or worse. It immediately became the punchline of late-night jokes, tarnishing the car's image before most people even saw it in person. Other design issues included overwrought chrome and strange proportions that looked dated even in 1958. Ill-fitting body panels and uneven paint finishes due to poor factory quality control. A cluttered dashboard with awkwardly placed controls. While Ford marketed the car as futuristic, it actually felt out of touch, arriving just as buyers were shifting toward compact, understated vehicles. The Edsel wasn't just ugly, it was unreliable. The 1958 Ranger came with a 361 cubic inch engine producing 303 horsepower. Impressive on paper, but poorly tuned in reality. Major problems included leaks and overheating due to rushed engine assembly, a complex and failure-prone Teletouch push-button transmission mounted in the steering wheel hub, poor fit and finish, misaligned doors, rattling interiors, and missing trim pieces straight from the factory. Terrible gas mileage during the middle of the 1958 recession and fuel-conscious consumer shift. The Edsel was literally falling apart on dealer lots even before buyers could take them home. The Edsel's failure wasn't only about design, it was horrible timing. The car launched in September 1957, just as the U.S. economy slipped into a recession. Buyers weren't looking for flashy new brands, they wanted practical, affordable cars. Meanwhile, Ford's marketing hyped the Edsel as the car of the future, but people were skeptical of a completely new nameplate, especially one that cost more than many established models. To make things worse, dealers didn't know how to sell it, Ford misallocated its distribution, and its initial advertising overpromised features that didn't work. In its first year, Ford expected to sell 200,000 Edsels. They sold only 63,000, and most were heavily discounted. The brand became a running joke across America. The word Edsel became synonymous with failure. Ford tried to keep it alive for 2 more years, but by 1960, the Edsel was dead. The financial loss was enormous, but the brand damage was worse. Ford executives swore never again to launch such a hyped-up, revolutionary car without understanding the market first. Today, the 1958 Edsel Ranger is remembered as a symbol of corporate arrogance and design failure. But it's also a fascinating study in how marketing, timing, and engineering missteps can doom even the biggest automakers. Ironically, surviving Edsels have become collectors' curiosities, not for their beauty, but for their notoriety. They represent a time when Detroit believed money and hype could replace good design and honest engineering, and learned the hard way that it couldn't. The 1958 Edsel Ranger wasn't just a bad car, it was a perfect storm of poor planning and misjudgment. Ford tried to build the future of automobiles, but ended up creating the future of corporate embarrassment. Its legacy remains one of the most valuable lessons in automotive history. No amount of hype can save a car that doesn't connect with its drivers. Number 9. The early 1970s were a turning point for the American car industry. Compact imports like Toyota, Datsun, and Volkswagen were winning over U.S. buyers who wanted affordable, fuel-efficient, and reliable vehicles. In response, General Motors poured its massive resources into creating a world-class small car that would crush the foreign competition. The result was the Chevrolet Vega, launched in 1970 with great fanfare and remembered today as one of the biggest mechanical and corporate embarrassments in American automotive history. By 1973, the Vega's problems had become impossible to ignore. Rust, oil burning, engine failures, and build quality so bad that many cars didn't survive their warranties. In the late 1960s, GM executives envisioned the Vega as a revolution, a car that would prove Detroit could build a lightweight modern compact to rival the Japanese. The Vega was designed with innovation in mind, a 2.3-liter aluminum inline-4 with advanced die-cast block technology, a lightweight unitized body for better fuel economy, sleek European-inspired styling, aggressive pricing to attract young buyers. Chevrolet hyped it as a triumph of engineering efficiency, the little car that does everything well. Unfortunately, the Vega did nothing well for very long. The centerpiece of the Vega's innovation was its aluminum engine, and it was also its downfall. Instead of using iron cylinder liners, a common practice to prevent wear, GM engineers attempted a silicon-impregnated aluminum bore design called Silichrome 390. On paper, it was advanced. In reality, it was catastrophically unreliable. Rapid cylinder wear due to poor cooling and expansion. Overheating which warped the head gasket and block. Oil consumption so severe that brand new Vegas were burning a quart every 100 miles. Weak head bolts which stretched under heat, causing coolant leaks and engine failure. By 1973, Vega engines were failing before 50,000 miles, often much sooner. The phrase, Vega runs on oil, became a bitter joke among owners. If the Vega's engine didn't die first, rust did the job. GM's Lordstown, Ohio assembly plant, built to produce 100 Vegas per hour, was notorious for rushed and sloppy workmanship. The Vega's thin-gauge steel and poor rust-proofing made it dissolve before your eyes. Typical issues: rust bubbles forming within months of purchase, fenders and rocker panels disintegrating in a year, structural corrosion that caused door hinges and suspension mounts to fail. In snowy or coastal regions, the 1973 Vega became a pile of rust on wheels before the odometer hit 30,000 miles. It was so bad that Chevrolet issued multiple corrosion recalls, but the damage to public trust was permanent. The Vega wasn't just unreliable, it was dangerous. Its light construction made it highly unstable in collisions. The front end crumpled unpredictably, often trapping occupants. The fuel system was prone to leaks, increasing fire risks. Poor steering components caused wandering and unpredictable handling at highway speeds. Owners reported steering vibrations, brake failures, and suspension collapses all within the first few years of ownership. GM's attempt to modernize production with a high-speed automated production plant at Lordstown, Ohio, became infamous. Workers were pushed to assemble cars at record speeds, over 100 cars per hour, leading to massive quality control problems. Bolts were left loose, paint jobs were uneven, and wiring harnesses were misrouted. Labor unrest and strikes only worsened the chaos. The Vega became a symbol of corporate arrogance and worker discontent, where the rush to cut costs destroyed quality. Initially, the Vega sold well thanks to its low price and good looks, but by 1973, the word had spread and the public turned on Chevrolet. Common owner experiences included engines dying before 40,000 miles, fenders rusting within a year, transmission failures and misaligned doors, constant oil smoke pouring out of the tailpipe. Consumer Reports eventually labeled the Vega a car to avoid. Lawsuits and recalls followed, and Chevrolet quietly phased it out after 1977. By then, the damage to GM's reputation was immense. Many buyers switched permanently to imports like the Toyota Corolla and Honda Civic, cars that truly delivered what the Vega had only promised. The 1973 Chevrolet Vega became a textbook example of corporate hubris, a car that tried to do too much, too fast, with too little testing. Its failures taught the industry painful lessons about the importance of real-world durability testing, the dangers of marketing over engineering, the cost of neglecting build quality. Even decades later, Vega remains a shorthand for automotive disaster, mentioned in the same breath as the Ford Edsel and the Yugo. The 1973 Chevrolet Vega was supposed to be GM's proud answer to the import invasion, but it became Detroit's most embarrassing defeat. It burned oil, rusted apart, overheated, and collapsed under its own hype. More than a bad car, it was a symbol of American overconfidence built by a company that believed image mattered more than integrity. Its legacy still echoes today, a reminder that you can't mass-produce quality through marketing slogans. Number 8. In the 1950s, America was in love with gadgets. From television sets to automatic toasters, every company wanted to showcase futuristic innovation. Ford, eager to outshine Chevrolet, decided to bring that futuristic flair to automobiles. Their answer? The 1957 Ford Fairlane 500 Skyliner, the first production car in the world with a fully retractable hardtop roof. The idea was pure 1950s optimism. A coupe that could transform into a convertible at the push of a button. On paper, it sounded like the future of driving. In reality, it became one of the most over-engineered cars of the decade. The Skyliner's retractable top was a masterpiece of complexity. 7 electric motors, 4 lift jacks, 10 solenoids, and almost 610 feet of wiring. It was the kind of mechanical orchestra that impressed engineers, but terrified mechanics. Owners quickly found out that while the top did work, it was extremely prone to failure. A single misaligned limit switch or weak motor could jam the entire system. Even minor electrical shorts could stop the process halfway, leaving the top awkwardly stuck in the air like a mechanical sculpture of regret. Dealerships had to train special technicians just to handle the retractable system. It was a technical wonder, but a maintenance nightmare. All that machinery came at a price: weight. The Skyliner tipped the scales at over 4,000 pounds, making it one of the heaviest Fords of its class. That extra bulk robbed the car of agility and fuel efficiency. Even with Ford's 312 cubic inch V8, the Skyliner was slow off the line. The handling was clumsy, braking distances were long, and every bump in the road reminded drivers that they were hauling a mechanical elephant. While the hardtop looked sleek when closed, it devoured trunk space when retracted. The roof's folding mechanism left barely enough room for a small suitcase. Buyers who wanted a glamorous road trip car soon realized they couldn't even fit their luggage in the trunk. Stylistically, the Skyliner's design was bold, long, low, and chromed to the max. Yet it lacked the cohesive beauty of its Chevrolet Bel Air rival. The Skyliner's lines were dictated more by engineering necessity than by elegant design, leading to a car that looked a bit awkward from certain angles. Despite its groundbreaking technology, the Skyliner was a sales flop. 1957, Ford sold around 20,766 units, not bad initially, due to public curiosity. 1958 to 1959, sales fell sharply as word spread about mechanical issues and high costs. By 1959, Ford quietly discontinued the model. The company realized that the public wasn't ready for such a complicated and unreliable car, especially one that cost hundreds more than a traditional soft-top convertible. Today, the 1957 Ford Skyliner stands as both a symbol of innovation and a lesson in over-engineering. It represents the 1950s mindset perfectly, when technology was seen as the ultimate expression of progress, even if practicality had to be sacrificed. Collectors now appreciate the Skyliner for its uniqueness and the sheer audacity of its design. Watching the roof fold itself into the trunk is still mesmerizing, when it actually works. The 1957 Ford Skyliner was not a bad idea. It was simply too much, too soon. It taught the auto industry a critical lesson. Technological marvels must serve the driver, not the engineer's ego. Ford's daring attempt to build the car of tomorrow resulted in a vehicle that broke down today. And for all its flaws, the Skyliner remains a fascinating chapter in America's post-war automotive dream, when ambition often outran reality. World's first retractable hardtop convertible. 600 feet of wiring and 7 motors. Overly complex and unreliable. Heavy, slow, and with almost no trunk space. Sales failure after initial hype. Now a rare collectible that symbolizes 1950s over-engineering. Number 7. By 1959, the American automobile industry was deep in the grip of a design fever. Tail fins, chrome, and space-age ornamentation had become the language of success. Dodge, desperate to outshine Chevrolet and Ford, unleashed one of the most flamboyant creations ever to roll off a Detroit assembly line, the 1959 Dodge Custom Royal. This car wasn't just transportation, it was a moving sculpture of mid-century optimism. Unfortunately, it also became a prime example of how far style could stray from function. The 1959 Custom Royal embodied the late stages of Virgil Exner's forward-look design philosophy, an era when Dodge believed that every car should look like it could fly to the moon. The result was a rolling exaggeration of futuristic dreams. Towering tail fins that reached almost cartoonish proportions, sweeping chrome trim that seemed to cover every possible surface, jet-age taillights shaped like rocket boosters, a grille so large and toothy it could scare small children. From a distance it was flashy, up close it was chaotic. The design looked like 10 different ideas crammed into one body, and none of them agreed with each other. Even contemporary critics noted that Dodge's designs were becoming baroque, decorative to the point of absurdity. The Custom Royal was the peak of that trend. Behind the wheel, the 1959 Custom Royal felt like piloting a floating living room. It was huge, heavy, and isolated from the road. The suspension was soft to the point of absurdity, ideal for cruising in a straight line, but terrible for any corner sharper than a country highway bend. Steering was vague, braking was slow, and the car's sheer size made parking a terrifying challenge. You didn't drive a Custom Royal, you guided it and hoped for the best. The Custom Royal offered several V8 engines, from the base 326 to the Super Red Ram 383 and the D500 361 high-performance variant. On paper, these power plants sounded impressive, with up to 320 horsepower. But the problem wasn't power, it was weight and build quality. The car's bulk canceled out much of that muscle, and quality control at Dodge's factories in the late 1950s was shockingly poor. Misaligned panels, squeaky interiors, and rust-prone bodywork plagued new owners. Many cars began showing corrosion within a year, especially in northern climates. Dodge's flashy exteriors concealed cheap steel and weak paint protection. By 1959, Chrysler Corporation was struggling with major engineering and production issues. The company had rushed the forward-look designs to market, and it showed. Electrical problems were common. Doors and trunk lids often misaligned. The push-button automatic transmission, innovative at the time, was finicky and prone to malfunction. Buyers were initially dazzled by the styling, but once the shine wore off, complaints piled up about reliability, fit and finish, and resale value. Within a year, the Custom Royal's reputation had sunk. It became one of the key reasons Dodge's sales fell sharply going into the 1960s. By 1960, the automotive trend had shifted toward cleaner, simpler lines, and suddenly, the Custom Royal looked like a relic. The very styling that had once screamed futuristic now looked clumsy and dated. Its flamboyance became an embarrassment. Middle-class families who once wanted to appear modern began trading in their flashy Dodges for more conservative Fords or Chevrolets. The Custom Royal, once the pinnacle of Dodge luxury, quietly disappeared after 1959, replaced by tamer, more restrained models. Today, the 1959 Dodge Custom Royal is a fascinating time capsule, a physical embodiment of America's late 50s design excess. Collectors love it for its sheer outrageousness, the fins, the chrome, the dashboard shaped like a rocket cockpit. But in historical context, it represents the end of an era, the moment when Detroit's obsession with style over substance hit its breaking point. The car's poor quality and exaggerated design helped spark a shift in consumer trust that would haunt Chrysler for decades. The 1959 Dodge Custom Royal was a car that looked like a dream and drove like a disappointment. It symbolized everything glorious and ridiculous about 1950s American automotive design. The belief that bigger, shinier, and louder was always better. In truth, it was a reminder that engineering must keep pace with imagination. When Dodge prioritized spectacle over substance, the result was inevitable. A chrome-plated catastrophe that aged faster than any car of its time. A showcase of late 50s forward-look excess, overloaded with chrome and tail fins. Poor build quality and mechanical unreliability plagued owners. Overweight, floaty handling, and weak structural integrity quickly became outdated as design trends shifted in 1960. today remembered as both a collectible oddity and a warning against excess. Number 6. By the late 1970s, Chrysler Corporation was in serious trouble. The oil crises of 1973 and 1979 had crushed the market for big, thirsty cars. The company was bleeding money, public confidence was at an all-time low, and its engineering department was stuck in the past. In that chaos, Chrysler tried to revive excitement with the Cordoba 300. A so-called performance luxury coupe meant to combine muscle car attitude with European-style refinement. What arrived instead was a noisy, underpowered pretender that symbolized just how lost Chrysler had become. The original 1975 to 1977 Chrysler Cordoba had been a surprise hit. Marketed as luxury you can afford, it appealed to middle-class buyers who wanted personal style without Cadillac prices. Actor Ricardo Montalban, with his rich and elegant voice, made the car famous with his commercials praising its soft Corinthian leather. But by 1979, that magic was gone. Chrysler redesigned the Cordoba on a smaller B-body platform to meet fuel economy rules. The car lost its stately proportions, gained weight in all the wrong places, and traded its distinctive style for a bland, square look. Then Chrysler tried to spice things up by releasing a special edition, the Cordoba 300. The 300 badge had once meant something powerful. In the 1950s and early 60s, the Chrysler 300 letter series cars were legends, massive, high-performance grand tours with racing pedigrees and thunderous V8s. By contrast, the 1979 Cordoba 300 was an attempt to cash in on that heritage without delivering the substance. It wore sporty stripes, bold 300 emblems, red and white paint, and a pseudo-performance image, but under the hood, things were much less exciting. Instead of a high-performance engine, the Cordoba 300 came with Chrysler's E58, 360 cubic inch V8, producing a mere 195 horsepower. On paper, that sounds adequate, until you realize the car weighed over 3,800 pounds and had to meet strict emission standards that strangled its power. Acceleration was disappointing. 0 to 60 miles per hour took over 9 seconds, and the quarter-mile time hovered around 17 seconds, slower than some economy cars of the era. The dual exhaust and performance tuning added sound, but not speed. Owners expecting the muscle of the old 300s were deeply disappointed. The car's performance was closer to moderately brisk than exciting. The Cordoba 300 handled poorly for a sporty model. Despite firmer suspension, it suffered from vague power steering, which made cornering unpredictable, body roll that reminded drivers they were still in a large luxury coupe, squeaks and rattles from loose trim pieces, and cheap interior plastics, a stark contrast to the premium feel promised by Chrysler's marketing. The 300 lettering and sporty stripes couldn't hide the fact that this was fundamentally a tired design. A big, lazy cruiser dressed up for a party it couldn't attend. By 1979, Chrysler's factories were notorious for poor quality control. Assembly line workers faced constant layoffs, morale was low, and parts shortages were frequent. The Cordoba 300 suffered the consequences. Paint peeling within months of ownership, electrical failures and short circuits in the dashboard, loose trim and leaks around windows and doors, transmission troubles, especially the weak TorqueFlite units paired with the 360 V8. Many buyers returned their cars for repairs repeatedly during the first year. The luxury image quickly turned into a reliability joke. Despite its shortcomings, the Cordoba 300 became a pop culture icon thanks to Chrysler's commercials featuring Ricardo Montalban. His smooth delivery, rich Corinthian leather, made the car seem far more sophisticated than it really was. But as critics quickly pointed out, the phrase was pure marketing fiction. Corinthian leather was just Chrysler's name for standard vinyl-trimmed leather upholstery made in New Jersey, not some exotic material from Greece. In short, Chrysler was selling the illusion of class, not the experience. The Cordoba 300 sold poorly. Only around 3,811 units were produced. The combination of rising fuel prices, declining quality, and disillusioned buyers ensured its short life. After 1979, the 300 name disappeared again until it was revived decades later. First with the 1999 300M, and then the successful 2005 Chrysler 300, which finally restored some dignity to the badge. Today, the 1979 Chrysler Cordoba 300 stands as a symbol of Detroit's decline in the late 1970s, a time when style and branding were all automakers had left to sell. It wasn't the worst car ever made, but it was dishonest. It promised a rebirth of American performance luxury, but delivered a noisy, cheaply built, slow coupe. The only thing truly luxurious about it was the advertising voice that sold it. The 1979 Cordoba 300 is a lesson in marketing over mechanics. It wore the badge of Chrysler's proudest performance lineage, but had none of the engineering, craftsmanship, or confidence that once defined the 300 name. In the end, it became a symbol of a collapsing era, a flashy pretender rolling through the shadows of the energy crisis and corporate desperation. Revived the legendary 300 badge but without true performance. Featured weak V8 power and poor handling for its weight. Suffered from Chrysler's notorious late 1970s quality issues. Marketed as luxury but delivered cheap build and noisy operation. Now remembered more for Ricardo Montalban's commercials than the car itself. Number 5. By 1970, the American Motors Corporation was fighting for relevance in a muscle car world dominated by giants. Ford with the Mustang, Chevy with the Chevelle SS, and Dodge with the Charger. AMC, known for economy cars like the Rambler, wanted to prove it could build a real American performance machine. Enter the 1970 AMC Rebel Machine, a car that shouted louder than it performed. Painted in red, white, and blue, it was meant to symbolize pure American muscle. But beneath the patriotic paint job was a car that struggled to keep up with its rivals, both in engineering and in identity. The Rebel Machine wasn't born from racing heritage, it was born from marketing desperation. AMC needed something to attract younger buyers who thought of the company as old-fashioned. So they partnered with Hurst Performance, famous for building special edition cars like the Hurst Olds, to create something bold, brash, and impossible to ignore. The result was a mid-size coupe with a 390 cubic inch V8 rated at 340 horsepower, dressed in a screaming red, white, and blue livery that looked like a parade float on wheels. AMC called it the Machine, not just another pretty car. Unfortunately, that was wishful thinking. The first thing anyone noticed about the Rebel Machine was its paint job. The standard version came in an unmistakable red body, white roof, and blue hood, complete with a massive hood scoop marked 390 CID. It looked like it was designed for a 4th of July parade rather than a drag strip. Later, AMC offered it in plain colors to attract less attention, but by then, the car's image as a rolling flag was cemented. The interior was equally uninspired. Cheap plastics, dull gauges, and thin seats wrapped in low-rent vinyl. AMC bragged about its machine-turned dash trim, but in reality, it looked like something out of a budget economy car. While other muscle cars like the Chevelle SS or Plymouth Roadrunner looked aggressive and purposeful, the Rebel Machine looked awkwardly patriotic. On paper, the 390 V8 made the Rebel machine sound promising. It produced 340 horsepower and 430 pound-feet of torque, giving it decent straight-line performance. The car could reach 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 6.5 seconds and a quarter mile in the mid-14s. Not bad for the time. But here's where things fell apart. The suspension was tuned more for comfort than control. The steering was vague and over-assisted. The brakes were inconsistent and prone to fade under stress. And the build quality varied wildly. AMC's small factories couldn't match the precision of Detroit's Big Three. As a result, the Rebel machine felt powerful in a straight line, but nervous and sloppy anywhere else. It was a car that barked louder than it bit. Driving a Rebel machine was like handling an angry farm animal. When you floored it, the engine roared with authority, but the rest of the car struggled to keep up. The front end lifted under acceleration, steering became light and unpredictable, and body roll was pronounced in corners. Road testers at the time called it brutish and unrefined. Car and Driver noted that while it was fast in a straight line, it felt heavier than it was, and lacked the finesse of its rivals. In other words, it was all attitude, no grace, and that made it hard to love. AMC promoted the Rebel machine as a blend of muscle car performance and daily driver civility. They even launched a series of cocky advertisements featuring slogans like, "The Machine," turning the man who has everything into a driver who wants everything. The problem was, buyers didn't want a compromise, they wanted dominance. And the Rebel machine, despite its theatrics, couldn't dominate. Against cars like the Plymouth Roadrunner 440 six-pack, Chevelle SS 396, or Boss 429 Mustang, it simply looked like an amateur. Worse, AMC's dealer network was small, and few customers were willing to pay over $3,400 for a muscle car from a company known for family sedans. Despite its loud marketing and patriotic design, AMC sold only about 2,326 Rebel machines in 1970. That was a disaster compared to its competitors. Part of the issue was timing. The muscle car era was peaking just as insurance rates and emissions rules were killing performance. But even without that, the Rebel machine was too crude, too costly, and too confused in purpose. By 1971, AMC dropped both the Rebel name and the machine concept, replacing it with the Matador, a car that was even more forgettable. Today, the Rebel machine has a small cult following, mainly among AMC enthusiasts who appreciate its weirdness in rarity. It's remembered for being bold but flawed, a car that tried to shout its way into muscle car history but ended up a footnote. As one critic put it, the Rebel machine wasn't a muscle car, it was a loud protest against being ignored. The Rebel machine's failure wasn't because AMC lacked ambition, it was because they lacked resources and refinement. It showed that true performance cars require more than horsepower. Suspension tuning must match power output. Build quality must inspire confidence. And design must communicate power without absurdity. AMC missed all three, and the Rebel machine paid the price. The 1970 AMC Rebel machine wanted to be a symbol of iron pride and muscle, but ended up a symbol of misplaced ambition. It wasn't truly fast, wasn't particularly fun, and certainly wasn't refined. It was an over-decorated, underdeveloped attempt to join a party that was already ending. Still, in its failure, it captured something poetic about AMC, a company that always dreamed bigger than its means allowed. The Rebel machine may have been clumsy, but it was undeniably brave. Number 4. The early 1980s were a strange time for the American auto industry. Fuel crises, new emissions laws, and the death of the muscle car left Detroit scrambling to find its identity. Cars were getting smaller, slower, and less inspiring, and Chrysler, in particular, was desperate for innovation after barely escaping bankruptcy in 1979. Enter the 1982 Dodge Rampage, a mini truck that wasn't really a truck at all. It was supposed to blend the utility of a pickup with the comfort and efficiency of a car. Instead, it became a symbol of indecision, a vehicle that tried to do everything and ended up doing nothing well. The Rampage was built on Chrysler's new L-body platform, shared with the Dodge Omni and Plymouth Horizon hatchbacks. This was Chrysler's first major foray into front-wheel drive, aimed at competing with fuel-efficient imports like the Volkswagen Rabbit and Honda Civic. But in 1982, Dodge decided to stretch the idea even further, literally. They took the underpinnings of the front-drive Dodge Omni O2 and later the Dodge Charger and hacked off the rear roof, turning it into a tiny pickup bed. The result was the Dodge Rampage, a front-wheel drive sport pickup that Chrysler marketed as a bridge between small cars and full-size trucks. Unfortunately, that bridge led straight to nowhere. At first glance, the Rampage looked confused. The front end was sleek and sporty, like a compact coupe. The rear half looked like someone sawed off the back of a station wagon. The proportions were awkward, low-slung, and narrow, with a bed too small to be useful. It could only carry 1,145 pounds of cargo, respectable on paper, but its soft car suspension and front-wheel layout meant it sagged badly with any real load. Hauling anything heavier than groceries, a lawnmower, or a bicycle caused the front wheels to lose traction. Even worse, with no weight in the bed, the Rampage's handling became twitchy and unstable. It was a pickup that didn't like picking anything up. Under the hood was Chrysler's infamous 2.2-liter inline-4, making just 84 horsepower. To put that in perspective, the truck weighed nearly 2,400 pounds. 0 to 60 miles per hour took over 13 seconds, and towing anything was out of the question. Even Dodge's ads couldn't hide its lack of muscle. One commercial bragged about its sporty handling and car-like comfort, but conveniently avoided the topic of power or payload. Drivers joked that the Rampage could haul a bag of groceries if you gave it a head start downhill. A 3-speed automatic was available, making performance even worse. Reviews from the era were merciless, calling it underpowered, overstyled, and unnecessary. Driving the Rampage was a bizarre experience. With front-wheel drive and no weight in the rear, it behaved like a nervous compact car, not a utility vehicle. It understeered in corners when loaded. It wheel-hopped when trying to accelerate on uneven ground, and on steep inclines, the tiny engine begged for mercy. Car and Driver wrote in 1982 that the Rampage looked sporty but handled like a shopping cart with ambition. The steering was overly light, the brakes mediocre, and the ride quality harsh when empty. Exactly the opposite of what most buyers wanted. It wasn't a truck, it wasn't a car, and it wasn't fun. It was the worst of all worlds. Dodge's marketing department had no idea how to sell the Rampage. Their tagline summed up the confusion perfectly: the truck for people who don't really need a truck. That line might sound self-aware now, but at the time it killed sales. Real truck buyers laughed it off, while small car buyers saw no reason to spend more money for less practicality. Even Chrysler's own dealerships were puzzled. Should they put it next to the sporty Dodge Charger or the utilitarian Dodge D-Series pickup? It fit neither crowd. In 1983, Plymouth got its own version of the Rampage, the Plymouth Scamp, with identical mechanics and only minor cosmetic differences. It flopped even harder, selling barely 2,000 units before being killed off after 1 year. The Rampage itself lasted until 1984, with total production under 40,000 units, a rounding error compared to Ford or Chevy's truck numbers. Even by Chrysler standards, it was an embarrassing failure. The Dodge Rampage failed for a few key reasons. It lacked identity, too small for truck buyers, too weird for car buyers. It was underpowered. The 2.2-liter engine couldn't move it with authority. It had poor dynamics. Front-wheel drive and light rear end killed handling. And it was badly timed. The market for car-truck hybrids barely existed in 1982. It was as if Dodge built a solution to a problem no one had, a vehicle for a customer who didn't exist. Ironically, decades later, vehicles like the Subaru Baja and Hyundai Santa Cruz would revisit the same car-truck hybrid idea and find modest success. But those vehicles had better engines, better safety, and true crossover utility. The Rampage, by contrast, was primitive and fragile. Its unibody structure lacked rigidity, its small brakes overheated easily, and its cheap interior fell apart within a few years. Today, it's mostly remembered as a quirky curiosity, one of the strangest footnotes in Dodge's long history of experimentation. The 1982 Dodge Rampage represented everything wrong with Chrysler's early 1980s philosophy. Bold ideas built on weak foundations. It was born from innovation, but doomed by execution. It wasn't entirely without charm. It was economical, easy to park, and visually unique. But in trying to be everything, car, truck, and sporty coupe, it mastered nothing. In the end, the Rampage was a victim of its own indecision. Too weak for work, too awkward for fun, and too weird for the mainstream. It tried to start a new automotive segment, but only ended up proving why that segment shouldn't exist, at least not yet. Specs for the 1982 Dodge Rampage. Based on the Dodge Omni/Charger L-body platform, front-wheel drive. 2.2-liter inline-4 with 84 horsepower, painfully underpowered. Payload rated at 1,145 pounds, but suspension and traction made it impractical. Marketed as a truck for people who don't need a truck. Total sales under 40,000 units, 1982 to 1984. Remembered today as an ambitious failure, the wrong idea at the wrong time. Number 3. In the late 1970s, America was still reeling from the oil crises of 1973 and 1979. Gasoline prices skyrocketed, and buyers suddenly cared about fuel economy. Detroit responded by offering a solution that sounded futuristic: diesel-powered passenger cars. Among the first was the 1979 Oldsmobile Cutlass Salon Diesel, a mid-size luxury sedan intended to give Americans European-style efficiency without sacrificing comfort or status. On paper, it promised everything: a smooth V8-like interior, respectable MPG, and the prestige of owning an Oldsmobile. In reality, it delivered unreliability, smoke, and buyer horror stories. The heart of the Cutlass Salon Diesel was GM's 5.7-liter 350cc Oldsmobile V8 diesel, one of the first large displacement diesels designed for American cars. It was a reworked gasoline V8, converted to run on diesel fuel. Compression ratios were raised, and glow plugs were added for cold starts. GM claimed it could deliver 25 to 28 mpg, a significant improvement over gas engines in similar cars. However, GM rushed development to meet the fuel crisis demand. The engine was inherently flawed. Head gaskets were weak, often failing after only 10,000 to 20,000 miles. Cylinder heads warped, causing coolant leaks and catastrophic engine damage. Diesel fuel injection and timing were not well calibrated for long-term durability. This meant that owners frequently faced blown engines, not a minor inconvenience, but total engine failure. Even when running, the Cutlass diesel was a miserable experience. At startup, the car often emitted thick black smoke, alarming neighbors and pedestrians. Acceleration was sluggish. The heavy sedan moved like a sleepy school bus, with 0 to 60 mph times over 15 seconds. Diesel vibration and clatter, combined with a lack of power steering refinement, made the car feel like a truck, masquerading as a luxury car. The promise of quiet, efficient diesel power was, in practice, a loud, smoky, underwhelming ordeal. The Cutlass diesel quickly earned a reputation for mechanical terror. Blown head gaskets were almost universal. Repair costs were extreme, often requiring a full engine rebuild. Fuel leaks and injector problems added to the fire hazard risk. Owners found themselves stranded on highways or in suburban neighborhoods, unable to restart the car. GM had sold tens of thousands of these engines before realizing the scale of the problem. Consumer confidence in diesels plummeted, and many Americans swore off diesel cars entirely for decades, associating the fuel with smoke, noise, and expensive repairs. Initially, GM marketed the Cutlass diesel as a fuel-efficient, status-conscious choice. Dealers advertised it as luxury Oldsmobile style with diesel economy, finally, fuel savings without compromise. But sales were short-lived. By 1981, GM was forced to reconsider diesel for passenger cars, and the Cutlass diesel became a symbol of corporate hubris and poor engineering. It's widely regarded as a lesson in rushing technology to market without adequate testing, a failure that tainted the reputation of American diesel cars for years. Despite its promise, the Cutlass diesel left an indelible mark. It destroyed trust in American diesel technology for decades. Many cars were junked prematurely, despite being only a few years old. It became a collector's cautionary tale, more notorious than desirable. In hindsight, the Cutlass diesel was ambitious but catastrophically executed. A car that wanted to be efficient, reliable, and luxurious, but delivered only headaches and smoke. It serves as a reminder that fuel-saving technology without proper engineering can ruin reputations, ruin engines, and ruin owners' patience. Engine: 5.7-liter Oldsmobile diesel converted from a gasoline design. Problems: blown head gaskets, warped cylinder heads, poor injection calibration. Driving: sluggish acceleration, noisy, smoky, underpowered. Market: sold 1979 to 1981, quickly tarnished GM's diesel reputation. Legacy: a cautionary tale about rushed engineering and overpromised technology. Number 2. The late 1950s in the United States was an era of bigger, flashier, and more opulent cars. Lincoln, Ford's luxury division, aimed to dominate this market with the Continental Mark III, a vehicle that symbolized wealth, status, and excess. At nearly 5,000 pounds, the Mark III wasn't just a car, it was a rolling statement of power and prestige. But this weight came at a cost. Handling, fuel economy, and practicality all suffered. The Mark III carried Lincoln's signature long hood, short deck proportions, and a formal roofline. Chrome trim, luxurious interiors, and attention to detail created a palatial driving experience. Leather, real wood accents, and plush seating made the cabin more akin to a lounge than a car. Its sheer size meant that parking and maneuvering in urban settings was challenging. Driveways, narrow streets, and tight garages were a constant obstacle. While visually stunning, the Mark III was aesthetics over function. The Mark III was powered by a 430 cubic inch Lincoln V8, producing about 375 horsepower, massive for the time. Fuel consumption was correspondingly massive. Single-digit city MPG was typical even for the era. Acceleration was adequate for straight roads, but handling was slow and ponderous, like trying to steer a battleship. Drum brakes on all four corners meant stopping this nearly 5,000-pound vehicle required significant distance, making sudden maneuvers dangerous. In short, speed and luxury were prioritized over agility and efficiency. Behind the wheel, the Mark III was a study in contradictions. Smooth and silent at low speeds, a gentle glide over pavement. Cumbersome and floaty in turns, prone to understeer due to its weight and long wheelbase. Steering required effort and parking demanded patience and skill. Owners often loved the prestige and comfort, but daily practicality was questionable at best. The Mark III wasn't designed for everyone. Its buyers were wealthy individuals who prioritized status and opulence over practicality. Executives, celebrities, and socialites who wanted a statement car rather than a driver's car. It competed with Cadillac Series 62 and Chrysler Imperial in a segment where size, luxury, and image mattered more than handling or fuel economy. The 1958 Lincoln Continental Mark III became an icon of post-war American excess, when cars grew ever larger to showcase wealth. Luxury at the expense of practicality, inspiring both admiration and criticism. Its weight and handling limitations were a cautionary tale. Bigger isn't always better, especially when it compromises safety and drivability. Today, the Mark III is a classic collectible, valued for its design, history, and the story of American luxury in the 1950s. A rolling palace, not a performance machine. Weight, nearly 5,000 pounds. Engine, 430 CI V8, 375 horsepower, extremely thirsty. Driving, smooth at low speeds, floaty in corners, poor braking performance. Luxury features: leather, wood trim, plush seats, formal roofline. Legacy, symbol of 1950s American excess and the luxury tank era. Number 1. By 1970, the American car market was shifting. Buyers wanted smaller, cheaper cars that were easier to park, more fuel efficient, and stylish enough to compete with imports. Ford responded with the Maverick, marketed as a sporty, affordable compact designed to attract young buyers and compete with the likes of Chevrolet Nova and imported European compacts. Price point was advertised at $1,995, cheap enough to lure budget-conscious buyers. Promise was sporty appearance without the high cost of a Mustang or full-size Ford. The Maverick had a sleek, fastback profile, a long hood, and clean lines meant to evoke sportiness and style. Optional trims included GT packages with stripes and sporty badging. Illusion of performance, looks suggested a fun, lively driving experience, but the reality often fell flat. The result? A car that looked fast but rarely was. The Maverick was built inexpensively, with thin steel panels and lightweight construction. Rust-prone materials meant that even early cars often showed corrosion, particularly in the fenders, rocker panels, and floor pans. Interiors were basic, cheap, and Spartan, with minimal sound insulation, emphasizing low cost over comfort. Ford saved money to hit the low price point, but the trade-off was long-term durability and reliability issues. Base engine was a 170 cubic inch inline six, producing about 105 horsepower, adequate for commuting but not exciting. Optional 200 cubic inch 6 or 308 V8 added some power, but performance was underwhelming, especially compared to contemporaries like the Mustang or Pontiac Firebird. Handling was adequate for casual driving, but the suspension was soft and vague, leaving the car feeling floaty at highway speeds. Sporty styling did not translate to sporty driving. The Maverick sold well initially because of price and appearance, appealing to first-time buyers and those downsizing from larger Fords. Enthusiasts were disappointed. It didn't handle like a sports car and didn't accelerate impressively. Over time, rust, underpowered engines, and basic construction made the Maverick a cheap, disposable car rather than a desirable compact. Sales success versus long-term reputation. Ford hit its price target but sacrificed performance and longevity. The Maverick remains a symbol of early 1970s budget cars, visually appealing but ultimately cheap and forgettable in driving experience. Today, it's sometimes restored by enthusiasts for its styling, but it's rarely remembered for performance or engineering excellence. Goal: affordable, stylish compact to compete with imports and budget sedans. Reality: bland driving experience, underpowered engines, cheap construction. Durability: prone to rust and mechanical issues. Legacy: a budget car that promised sportiness but delivered mediocrity.